I told you. Leukippe and Kleitophon. Very steamy. Welcome to Ms.Interpretations. My name is Marin, and this is my virtual campfire, where I read Greek texts in English translations so you don't have to. If you haven't seen part 1, stop this video and go back and watch it now so you can know about our characters and how many times they've died already.
You're sure nobody's follow us?
6 months later.
6 months later, Cleinias shows up to where Kleitophon, Menelaus, and Satyros are living in Egypt. He's resurrected. After the first shipwreck, Cleinias was able to return home to Sidon, but hid the truth from all of the parents. He told everyone that he had just been gone for a 10-day vacation, not gone with them on their elopement.
Don't be suspicious, don't be suspicious.
Cleinias tells Kleitophon that his dad, Hippias, said it was okay for him to marry Leukippe. Hippias decided not to tell Leukippe's dad, Sostratus, his brother, that the kids were missing. He's got a war to fight anyway.
Don't be suspicious, don't be suspicious.
Hippias is on his way to where they are in Egypt, but Kleitophon says it's too late. She's dead. Menelaus and Satyros recommend that Kleitophon marry Melite. She's a beautiful, rich Ephesian woman living in Alexandria, and she wants to marry Kleitophon. Kleitophon is able to delay Melite's advances, but eventually agrees to marry her once they arrive back in Ephesus, a place for him to hide from his father since Hippias is on the way to Alexandria. Kleitophon just can't face him now that Leukippe is dead. Because of him. They have a big wedding party in Alexandria so their friends can wish them well. Melite says, "How unique. This is rather like the ceremony for persons whose bodies can't be found. I've heard before of a tomb without a tenant, but not of a bride's empty bed." A joke, of course, but she was serious. On their voyage back to Ephesus, Melite keeps pestering Kleitophon to sleep with her, but he says not until they arrive in Ephesus. When they arrive, an estate slave woman with a shaved head and bound in heavy irons around her ankles throws herself at Melite's feet. "Have mercy on me, milady, as one woman to another. I am free by birth, though now a slave, as fortune chooses." Melite asks her story because she thinks the slave woman too beautiful to be a slave. She says her name is Leukippe from Thessaly, and she begs Melite to free her. She promises to pay her the money that her household head, Sosthenes, paid for her. She shows Melite the welts on her back from the lashings that she's been receiving from Sosthenes. Kleitophon is shaken by her wretched appearance and by her similarity to Leukippe. Melite was furious at the woman's treatment and demands that Sosthenes tell her what happened. Sosthenes says that Callisthenes sold her to him, and he said he got her from pirates, saying she was a freeborn woman named Leukippe. At dinner, Satyros signals Kleitophon to come over and hands Kleitophon a letter. It is Leukippe's peristasis catalog. More about this later. From Leukippe to her master Kleitophon. "It is master I must call you, for you are my mistress's husband. You know well all that I have suffered for you, yet now I am obliged to refresh your memory. For your sake I left my mother and undertook a life of wandering. For your sake I went through shipwreck and captivity at the hands of pirates. For your sake I have been a sacrificial victim, an expiatory offering, and twice have died. For your sake I have been sold and shackled in iron. I have wielded the hoe, scraped the earth, endured the lash. And was all this in order to become another man's wife, as you are now another woman's husband? God forbid! But while I have struggled through one disaster after another, here are you, unsold, unlashed. If there is any gratitude left in your heart for all of the troubles I have undergone for you, beg your wife to send me home as she promised. Farewell. Be happy in your new marriage. I write this letter still a virgin." Kleitophon said, "Did you carry this letter from Hades? What does it mean? Has Leukippe come to life again?" Sisteros replied, "She has indeed." Kleitophon writes back to Leukippe, begging her not to condemn him without a trial, and that he also has remained true to her. Not knowing Leukippe's relationship with Kleitophon, Melite asks Leukina for advice on how to get Kleitophon to sleep with her. This assures Leukippe that Kleitophon was honest about being true to her. Melite complains, "Some husband, I might as well be married to a rock. He's more interested in some dead woman. He's always talking about her, at meals, in bed. It's Leukippe this and Leukippe that." Shortly thereafter, Thersandros, Melite's husband, returns home. She was certain that he was killed in a war, but he was only apparently dead and has been resurrected. Thersandros is furious because he has heard that Kleitophon has married Melite. So he storms in and beats Kleitophon up, has him put in chains, and imprisons him in a room in their house. In the kerfuffle, Leukippe's letter falls out of Kleitophon's clothes, and Melite picks it up and reads it. Melite is big mad about Leukippe and confronts Kleitophon in his prison cell. She knows that she has to let him go, and Kleitophon feels sorry for her, so he sleeps with her, basically out of pity. Melite gives Kleitophon her clothes, and he leaves the cell, sneaking past the guard disguised as Melite. As Kleitophon was sneaking away, Thersandros catches him and takes him to jail and asks that he be charged with adultery. Meanwhile, Sosthenes, the household manager that lashed Leukippe, he had promised Leukippe to Thersandros. He kidnapped her and took her to a little house and promised her happiness with Thersandros. Leukippe treats Sosthenes like a bug. Melite tells Thersandros that she just took care of Kleitophon because she would hope someone would do the same for Thersandros in the same situation. She insists that everything that Thersandros has heard about her marriage to Kleitophon is just a rumor. Sosthenes is still trying to convince Leukippe to have Thersandros, and she is fed up with it. "I will praise Thersandros as a good man when he stops forcing himself on other men's wives." Thersandros meets Leukippe and immediately falls in love with her. Thersandros tries to talk to Leukippe, and he sits and talks with her. He tries to convince her to accept his advances, but she resists. Thersandros uses more force, and she accuses him of being like Kleitophon, an adulterer. He slaps her. "You should be thrilled that I even speak to you. You should think it a great blessing to kiss your master." Leukippe replied, "Since you mean to be a master, be mastered I must, but I will not be taken by force. Tell me, aren't you afraid of your goddess Artemis? You rape a virgin in the virgin's own city? Look at what you are doing. You are the real pirates. Aren't you ashamed to do what even brigands have not dared? My one weapon is my freedom, which cannot be shredded by lashes, dismembered by sharp blades, or burned away by fire. It is the one thing I shall never part with. If you try to set it on fire, you will not find the fire hot enough." You gotta love this girl. Thersandros tries to get Kleitophon's jailer to poison Kleitophon, but the jailer refuses. But Thersandros does convince the jailer to put one of his cronies in jail with Kleitophon. This guy lets it slip that Leukippe is dead because Melite ordered it. In fact, this guy tells Kleitophon that Melite paid him to find someone to kill Leukippe, and that's why he's in jail. Kleitophon grieves Leukippe's death again. Cleinias comes to visit the jail, and when Kleitophon tells his cousin what happened, he told Kleitophon, "Who knows whether she's still alive this time too? Hasn't she died many times before? Hasn't she often been resurrected?" So Thersandros takes Kleitophon to court, and Kleitophon makes a false confession, saying that he and Melite plotted together to murder Leukippe. "I cannot bear to go on living, a murderer, and still in love with her whom I killed." Melite is stunned. Cleinias speaks up for Kleitophon, saying that Leukippe has disappeared suddenly, and it's not clear whether someone has killed her or if she has been kidnapped and is still alive. But if there is no killer and no victim, who ever heard of such a murder? I was in love, he said, with Melite. That's why I killed Leukippe. How then can he accuse Melite, whom he loves, of murder, but want to die for Leukippe, whom he killed? Melite demands Thersandra's hand over Sosthenes, as he is the most likely suspect in her murder. Meanwhile, Sosthenes is in Leukippe's hut trying to woo her. He hears a commotion outside, and when he meets the guys who came to get him, he jumps on a horse and flees to Smyrna, leaving Leukippe's door unlocked. Back in court, Thersandra's speaks up, saying that Kleitophon's confession should have him sent to the executioner right now, and he probably killed Sosthenes too, because he's been missing for 3 days. The elders convicted Kleitophon, and before they had him executed, they decided to torture him the next day to reveal Melite's part in the murder. Cleinias calls out to the gods for help, and just then, a priest of Artemis comes walking down the road towards the court. He indicates that an embassy to the goddess has arrived and puts an instant moratorium on all punishments for however many days the ambassadors choose to make sacrifices. The leader of this embassy is none other than Sostratus, Leukippe's father. They had experienced an apparition from Artemis during their war, and when they won, they felt obligated to come to Artemis's city and make sacrifices for her. Artemis even appeared to Sostratus and told him that he would find his daughter and his brother's son Kleitophon in Ephesus. Meanwhile, back at the hut, Leukippe took advantage of the unlocked door and ran as fast as she could to the temple of Artemis, which was nearby, and took refuge there. Only men and virgins are allowed in the temple of Artemis. She had just barely missed meeting her father on the road. Sostratus came up to Kleitophon in the court and asked, "Where's Leukippe?" Others told her father about Kleitophon's confession. He lunged at Kleitophon and almost gouged out his eyes. Cleinias steps in and says, "What are you doing, man? Why this stupid outburst against a man who loves Leukippe more than you do?" He set himself up to suffer death because he thought she was dead. Sostratus calls out to Artemis, "Is this why you led me here, O lady?" When Cleinias hears about Sostratus' dream, he says, "Courage, father. Artemis does not lie. Your Leukippe is alive. Have faith in my predictions. Don't you see how she just saved this man too, snatching him from the torturers as he hung in the ropes?" Just then, one of the temple attendants comes running up and tells everyone that a maiden has sought refuge in the temple of Artemis. They believed Cleinias now, especially since the attendant told them that her beauty is only second to Artemis herself. Kleitophon shouts, "It must be Leukippe," and the attendant says, "Yes. Her country is Byzantium and her father is Sostratus." Kleitophon jumps up, chains and all, and flew to the temple as if hurled from a catapult. The guards think he is trying to escape and run after him, shouting at passers-by to grab Kleitophon. Some manage to stop him, and the guards start to drag him back to jail. Cleinias and Sostratus tell the guards that he can't have committed the murder for which he was convicted because the girl is still alive. Sostratus vouches for Kleitophon, saying that he will present Kleitophon when needed. So Kleitophon was released to Sostratus, and they run to Leukippe. She runs to hug her father and looks at Kleitophon the whole time. He wants to embrace her, but doesn't dare in front of her father. They start to tell each other their stories when Thersandra's bursts in with witnesses saying, "I call these people to witness that you have improperly removed from death row a person condemned to legal execution. You hold my female slave as well, a lascivious woman, a nymphomaniac. You had better keep her for me." These were fighting words. Kleitophon says, "And you, sir, are a slave from a long line of slaves, a lunatic and a lecher. She is a free woman and a virgin, and worthy of the goddess." Thersandra's socks Kleitophon and bloodies his nose, and gashing his own hand against Kleitophon's teeth in the process. Kleitophon cries out how sacrilegious this is against Artemis herself. The crowd turns on Thersandra's, and as they drag him away, he shouts to Kleitophon, "Your case has already been decided, and you will presently suffer punishment As for that pseudo-virgin prostitute, the flute will punish her. The priest had them all for dinner and asked for their stories. Sostratus recounts his short part, and then Kleitophon tells his and Leukippe's story, making sure to leave out his encounter with Melite, and elaborating on Leukippe's side of the story to ensure she is seen as brave, upstanding, and chaste as her father listened on. Presently, Kleitophon asks about Thersandros' parting words. Specifically, what did he mean about the flute judging Leukippe? The priest then relays the story of the Syrinx, the virgin nymph who was pursued by Pan. As she fled from Pan, he reached out to grab her hair flowing behind her, and her hair turned into reeds that normally grow in the river. Pan, realizing Syrinx had turned into these reeds, he mourned her and turned the reeds into an instrument, Pan's flute. So, later, the cave behind the temple of Artemis was given to Artemis by Pan with the agreement that only virgins could enter. If a woman enters and is a virgin, the sound of the pipes play, and she emerges from the cave with a crown made of sprigs of pine. If she is not a virgin, the cave screams. The people witnessing the event leave, and after 3 days, the priestess enters the cave to find no trace of the woman who lied about her virginity, and the flute is on the ground of the cave. Leukippe is like, "Sign me up, let's do it, you non-believers." But she would have to wait because she could only enter the cave if her virginity was formally challenged. So the next day, the embassy with Sostratus made sacrifices to Artemis. Thersandros showed up with others and told the president of the legal court to set trial for the next day so he could confront Kleitophon and Melite again. The following day, Thersandros stands up in court and complains that Kleitophon is free, even though he was sentenced to death. For what? It doesn't matter. Yeah, it was for killing Leukippe. Then he starts in on Melite. He wants her maids to be tortured there in the court to find out if Melite lived with Kleitophon as a husband, much less an adulterer. He ends with, "I also have a case against that slave girl Leukippe," but he'll wait on that till the other two are judged. The priest of the temple of Artemis stepped forward and spoke on behalf of Kleitophon, saying that Thersandros is complaining that an innocent man was set free, but Thersandros himself acted like a tyrant when he locked up Kleitophon without a trial in his house. Also, the priest attacks the sexual integrity of Thersandros in the urbane style of comedy. A burlesque story, if you will, going on and on about, in his youth, he was on intimate terms with many well-endowed men. He details more of Thersandros' activities at the gymnasium where he was supposed to be studying. The priest ended with saying something like, "Who did Kleitophon murder? The woman standing here?" Thersandros then challenged Melite to stand in the waters of the Styx and declare that she did not sleep with Kleitophon during the period while Thersandros was away. And he challenged Leukippe to either admit that she is not a virgin and come back to him as his slave, or enter the cave of the Syrinx and prove that she is a virgin. Both women were glad to prove themselves. Leukippe because she had kept herself pure, and Melite because, technically, she only slept with Kleitophon after Thersandros had returned.
No, it is a trick question.
The myth of the water of the holy Styx is in a spring nearby. Essentially, it can reveal a liar. The accused writes her oath, swearing to what she says is true, on a tablet and ties it around her neck. Then she walks into the water up to her knees. If she is truthful, the spring stays still. If she is lying, the water rushes and rises up to her neck and covers up the tablet where the oath is written. Everyone agrees these trials will occur the next day. They went first to the cave of the Syrinx, and Leukippe entered the cave wearing a white robe, and shortly after she did, the melody of the flute was heard. She emerged from the cave with pine sprigs in her hair. Next, they took Melite to the spring of the Styx, and when she entered the water with the tablet around her neck, nothing happened. She was vindicated as well. As she was walking out of the water, Thersandros slipped away back to his house. He was defeated twice, and now a group of people were dragging Sosthenes up to the crowd. Melite had sent some servants to go find Sosthenes so she could produce him to the court, and they would realize that no one had been murdered. The next day, Sosthenes was just about to be tortured when he confessed to everything he and Thersandros had conspired. Sosthenes was thrown back into jail to serve his sentence, and Thersandros, he was condemned to banishment in absentia. They all have a meal again with the priest and retell their stories. This time, Leukippe is asked how she survived beheading. She recounts that she was taken to the pirate ship, where Chaereas told the pirates to have another slave on board, change clothes with Leukippe, and then to behead the girl dressed as Leukippe. This was because they saw Kleitophon's boat gaining on them as they were trying to sail away. When Chaereas told them he was taking Leukippe, the pirates refused because he had already cost them the slave girl they had intended to sell. Instead, they chopped off Chaereas' head and sold Leukippe into slavery. Apparently, Leukippe was sold to the merchant Callisthenes, the one who stole Caligone, who then sold Leukippe to Sosthenes. There's no connection made in the text here to Callisthenes being both the one who stole Caligone and who sold Leukippe into slavery. But the very next story is Sostratus recounting what happened to Caligone and Callisthenes, so maybe we're supposed to infer that they made the connection. When Callisthenes found out that Caligone wasn't Leukippe, it didn't matter to him because he fell madly in love with Caligone anyway. He spent their whole journey back to Byzantium vowing that he was not a brigand, but a fine man who could give her the world. He transformed from a wastrel to a gentleman in every way because he wanted to win Caligone. He took Caligone to her uncle Sostratus' household, wrote up a contract of engagement to Caligone, promising her an immense dowry. He became a soldier in Sostratus' army fighting the war, and eventually becoming a general. When they won the war, Sostratus came to Ephesus to give sacrifices to Artemis, and Callisthenes went to Tyre with an embassy to give sacrifices to Heracles. He had confessed to Sostratus what he had done in kidnapping Caligone, and that he wanted to go ask Hippias for Caligone's hand in marriage. The group in Ephesus then sailed back to Tyre, where Callisthenes and Caligone were married, and Leukippe and Kleitophon were finally married, and they all lived happily ever after. Wow, what a story, am I right? First, I'd like to restate, as I did in this video, that the ideas I am making in comparing these novels to the New Testament come from Dr. Ronald F. Hawk. Like Chaereas and Callirrhue and An Ephesian Tale, we know the heroes of this story because they experience the usual themes of being the best and most beautiful young people who fall in love at first sight and have some obstacles to getting them together. But this time, they don't marry at the beginning of the story like Chaereas and Callirrhue or Habbachromes and Anthea in An Ephesian Tale. No, their chastity, mainly Leukippe's, is one of the most important elements in this steamy story. Along with the hero's love at first sight and minor obstacles to that love, we have the romantic hero's journey that echoes the epic hero's journey. Like Odysseus, they must travel and endure hardship and humiliation, shipwreck and slavery, indictments and imprisonments. This is the theme in ancient Greek and Roman stories of humiliation, exaltation. The most revered people who are compared to the gods suffer humiliation like slaves and prisoners, and then are exalted in the end. We can compare this humiliation exaltation to the hymn in Philippians, relating Jesus as divine, humbling himself, and then being exalted again. Leukippe's letter to Kleitophon at Melite's estate is a peristasis catalog, a kind of lament or recounting of all her hardships. I discuss these speeches in an Ephesian tale, but Chaereas and Callirrhoe has multiple peristasis catalogs from its heroes as well. Here, Leukippe recounts her humiliations and requests Kleitophon's help in going home back to her exalted status. We have to talk about apparent death, or Scheintod, as the Germans say. This theme is in every story we've covered so far. Did you count how many times Leukippe died? 3? 4? It even becomes a kind of meme within the story when Cleinias says to Kleitophon, "Who knows whether she is alive this time too? Hasn't she died many times before? Hasn't she often been resurrected?" There are no empty tombs in this story like the others, but there are references to them. Indirectly, when Leukippe first climbs from her coffin after being sacrificed by the brigands, and directly when Melite says, "How unique! This is rather like the ceremony for persons whose bodies can't be found. I've heard before of a tomb without a tenant, but not of a bride's empty bed." So, empty tombs and ceremonies for missing bodies are common. Something particular about this novel is the many detailed descriptions of artwork, myths about gods and goddesses, and fabulous stories peppered throughout the work. As mentioned, the story opens with a 2-page description of the painting of the Rape of Europa. There are similar descriptions of other artworks and mythical stories throughout the entire novel. This detailed description is an example of ekphrasis. In the Greco-Roman world, there were a series of writing exercises, an ancient curriculum that younger schoolboys completed as a part of their education. The 14 exercises known as the progymnasmata included studying, copying, and then creating original writings like fables, narratives, descriptions, maxims, persuasive speeches, etc., all the way up to legal writings. I just want to highlight here that the inclusion of these different examples from the exercises of the progymnasmata are all over this and the other Greek novels. It indicates that the writers were educated, and in Leukippe and Kleitophon, Achilles Tatius reveals his education in his descriptions of art and in recounting myths of gods like Dionysus, Pan, and Artemis. Some of these descriptions are narratives within the larger narrative. The many court cases and council inquiries in the 3 stories we've covered so far are examples of the feature of legal speech taught as a part of the progymnasmata. These speeches are central parts of these stories and help move the narrative along. Throughout Acts, there are numerous speeches given by different apostles and their witnesses, defending them against charges of heresy. Some are won and some are lost, as in the case of Stephen. How many times, though, are Paul and others miraculously set free from prison or let go because the point is they have done no wrong? I think of this when I see how furious Thersandros is at Kleitophon, and he wants him dead no matter what. Kleitophon's freedom before his second case is not miraculous, but it is divine in a way, as it is the priest who allows Kleitophon to go free. This story centers much of its activity around Artemis and her temple. You may remember that there is a fascinating incident in Ephesus regarding Artemis and her temple in Acts 19:21 through 41. Paul has been preaching that small statues are idols. They're not gods. And the number of followers of Paul has been growing. The local craftsmen who make a living fashioning small statues in temples of Artemis get together and express their displeasure with Paul's preaching. They gathered in the theater where they demanded to be heard by the town leaders. There was shouting and commotion and a few speeches. Finally, the clerk says the matter needs to be settled in the courts or in the regular assembly. He said they should leave before they're charged with rioting. What is interesting to me about this incident about Artemis idols in Ephesus is that we can better understand the milieu of this incident in Acts after seeing how important Artemis is to the Greco-Roman world, their culture, in these Greek romances. We have a fuller picture. You would have an even more complete picture of the New Testament world if you read these stories yourself. They are a wild ride. Okay, again, one more time, with a feeling. The pirates plan to sacrifice Leukippe, a virgin, as a prayer for purr. Let's go back again one more time. Okay, my butt hurts and I'm tired, but I'm gonna do this. Don't be suspicious. Mostly dead.